Okay.
You'll clean it
Yeah,
up
we
in
kept.
post.
Yep. Hey guys, sorry about that. We lost my
We
home internet. Is my home is internet being what it is. I think I'm gonna have to get a new whole web thing, but we'll clean it up in post production, and all that other good stuff. So, but we were in the middle of asking Travis. Travis, so what is it then that you have done then to help change with your worldview on how you're looking at things now, and what is it that's really shaped where you're at now?
Uh, so hopefully you can clean up. I don't repeat myself, but it really was like just joining the military and doing that experience, meeting people from literally all walks of life. I mean, I said I had a best friend from Haiti, a great friend from Venezuela who I met my wife through, people from all parts of the U.S. You had your Boston accent boys from Boston. You had people from California. I mean, the, the people from Texas, which are very proud and always have to tell you they're from Texas. I mean, they have a lot of pride down there. That always cracked me up about Texas. I want to visit it just to see it, but yeah, just learning how other people view the world has helped me. It's definitely shaped the way how I view the world, and that view is always changing, 100%. And I heard myself talk. Shaped the way how
I'm
I view the
definitely hearing
world,
that
and
too.
that yeah, what's up with that?
I'm definitely. There we go. I don't know what happened there.
Okay, so I would say that, and I think it's taught me to be open-minded, but also it goes back to what you talked about what your teacher taught you and what you taught us. Be open-minded, but think, like put a lot of thought into it. Don't just. I think that's something I wanted to clear up too. We always talk about being open-minded, but I don't want people to think being open-minded is just being like, okay, well, I gotta believe in this thing because I need to open. I just need to believe it to be more open about it. You know what I mean? Like put some thought into why you think the way you think. But undoubtedly, yeah, it was the experiences, the places I've been, the people. It, you don't get that staying in the same town over like your whole life. I mean, there's people that have lived in where I'm from, Pike County, Missouri, like their whole life. And if they enjoy that, that's great. I mean, but me, I couldn't imagine that. I really I always had an urge to like I had to leave. I just had to go. I had to go see the world but
And
yeah, that's
and we have people like that too within our group. I mean, they're still. I mean, Jason has obviously still has family connection there, and Janine did until her father passed. But I mean, there's people there that never left, right, Jason? I mean, there's still those people who are, you can't get, and I don't know if that's just the fear, the comfort of being what you're in. But I think I I looked at it as a curse at the time. But when my dad, we were used to moving, as my father being a mission pastor,
yeah.
you know, but there was just those some of those, and I mean, I knew I wasn't going to stay in Waverly. I sure as heck knew I wasn't going to stay in Canton all my life.
I think the comfort thing you mentioned is a big part of it. I
Yeah,
mean, you know where the jobs are. You already have a good idea what your life can look like because you don't know anything else. And there's comfort in that. And that was something that scared the hell out of me. I don't know if Jason, you had a similar experience and was part of the reason you wanted to go off to college and get away. But that was one of the things that scared the hell out of me was being comfortable with this is my life. Like this is all there is.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an element of that. And um I would say like with our class, I'd have to go back and look through a yearbook and it'd take me 15 seconds, but probably half our class, give or take, is still in and around Waverly, right? I mean, that's just a guess, maybe even a little more than
say
that,
I was going to
maybe
say say
slightly more than that, but not a whole lot more than that. And there's a handful of people that I could think of that didn't go far from Waverly, but still went far, far, far away from Waverly, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Basically, for whatever reason, severed most of their ties to Waverly, and then I think some people stay because it's comfortable. Some people stay because it's where their family is. I mean, there's a million
That's a
reasons
part of it too. Yeah, of course.
there's a million reasons people stay, but yeah, I think it is easy to want to stay, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter even if you grow up. Like the suburb I live in is 25,000 people, and we're surrounded by you know a population of whatever the Chicago metro area is now, 10, 11, 12 million,
Yeah, something
something
ridiculous.
like that.
Third largest city in the United
And
States. Yep.
and I every day I meet people who live here in Villa Park who went to Villa Park. You go to Willowbrook
Yeah,
High School, where my son goes to high school, and a huge portion of the teachers that teach there graduated from Willowbrook.
Hmm.
They're back there because it's what they know, it's where their family is, and um, you just hope that people have that opportunity, whether it's through school or it could be work experiences or whatever life experiences. I mean, for some people, it's you if it's your mission or volunteer or whatever, that you have those experiences that allow you to try to, where none of us are perfect, but look at the world through the eyes of somebody that's not you.
Yeah. Right.
For a
Do you
few
guys
minutes.
do you guys think that it's in your generation it was more there was more of the stay with not necessarily what's more comfortable, but there was a more of staying close to where you're from as opposed to maybe the generations now, like the younger
I
generation.
Yes, I firmly believe that people talk about how we are fractured as a society. I mean, I know that's like a theme right now, right?
Right.
Whether it's politically fractured or morally fractured or socially fractured or whatever people want to,
Right.
say. I think two of the factors of that, and I don't think either of them are necessarily bad, um, but they are smaller nuclear families.
Hmm.
Like the average family now is, I mean, if you have three kids,
You got a
that's kind
lot.
of a big family.
Right.
Yeah, it
I
is.
mean, there's a lot of only children in two children households. And then there's also, I think, it's a combination of, technology and the changing in job markets. The reality is that most jobs that not all jobs that pay well, but most jobs that pay well are in urban centers. Um, yes, there are jobs that pay well outside of urban centers, but the majority of them, you're going to have to go to an urban center of some sort. And so those draw people to parts of the country that their family aren't in. And so you have small families, small nuclear families that aren't necessarily physically close to their extended family.
Hmm.
And
And
so
I
I
wonder.
think that's more like you were saying. Was there more staying close? I think like the generation before us, there was a lot of that, and we're kind of that
Were
in
you guys
between
kind of
generation.
to start the change? Like
Yeah.
that's when it
Yeah,
kind of
I think
started to
so. Yeah.
okay.
And we were also, and I want to kind of branch off of that a little bit too. We were the so, and Jason and I mentioned this too last night. So our parent groups were of two different. They were my my parents were at my parents were more in the Depression era, whereas my dad is 88. Jason, you said last night your dad's 74, correct?
You're 72, I think.
72. And
Yeah.
so we had that thing going to where, and I mean, Jason's parents, and Jason may not think this, but I did, that Jason's parents were a little bit more forward thinking than what my parents were thinking, in that, hey, we trust our kid to do a little bit more and to go a little bit more and out and test his wings and everything. My parents were about that too, but my parents were also of this generation where we're going to hold on to that last dime really tight, and we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that, and you're going to buy, but I was also of that mindset that here's what you're going to think, here's what you're going to believe. And because this is the way that our parents were raised, in the depression, and then this, and then that. When we start, when I started to go out, and a lot of the way that I've developed in my own thinking now has been within the last 20 years, because I've been able to separate myself from the noise of the small town community that I grew up in, and outside of my extent. Now, my brothers and I are all still very close, but we also have learned over the years to, okay, hey, we're not in Waverly anymore. We're not in our small town anymore. We're in real life. And we need to go beyond and adapt to the new world picture. Whereas my dad is, the problem that my dad has now as an 88-year-old man is he still operates under this small tin, and God forbid that my father still calls black people colored. I mean, that was the generation that he grew up in.
Yeah.
And my dad, and I think I told you this, I may have not told you this, Travis, but so, funny story about my dad. So not this part isn't funny, but he broke his ankle back in February. And he's been going now to physical therapy now for a while. And he'll, and Jason can attest to this, my father can talk a stump to death. If you give my dad 15 minutes, he'll give you his life story.
I've seen him get some people out of the pews too, though.
Yeah. But my dad gets this, and he had this Iraq vet who's a physical trainer, and the Iraq vet had just had my fill with my dad, so he gives one of his new rookies to my dad, and it's a girl that my nieces went to college with, or to high school with, and very attractive young lady, but she's lesbian. And my brother was just this evil enough just to let my dad put his foot into his mouth, right? And so he, so do you got a boyfriend back at home? No, I have a girlfriend back at home. And my brother, everything he could say was but I was proud of my dad because he didn't, what she's good at doing is putting his foot in his mouth. But it's that, I say all that to say this, we had to learn how to adapt our from our small town mentality into a larger view. Oh, good evening. We just had a chat from our friend. Greetings from Russia. Hello, sir, from Russia. So we had, and I mean, I don't know, how did your parents' views kind of shape where you're at now, Jason, from that small town?
Well, it was kind of interesting for me because, one of my earliest memories, and certainly my earliest political memory, and maybe this shapes my worldview a little bit, is I recall sitting with my mom and being sad to watch Ronald Reagan absolutely destroyed Jimmy Carter in the 1980 election.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, at that point in my life, my dad was probably somewhat Republican as a farmer, but it was a different kind of Republican Party then.
Yes.
And I just mean generally, like, it's a different thing. And then, when my dad joined corrections and union and exposed between the unions and the workforce and the clientele, my dad was exposed to a very different worldview than the middle of nowhere, right? And so, both of my parents were fairly liberal in terms of their worldview and their politics for the time. And but I'd say, as far as like shaping me, the thing is, my parents Um, they didn't let me do anything I wanted whenever I wanted. It wasn't that, but they did let me uh, find my way a lot. Like one of the things I have explained to people is that like my parents never explicitly told me that I couldn't be friends with somebody
Right.
or that I couldn't date somebody because for any reason, even if my parents thought they were trouble, my parents never said you can't be friends with that
Right.
person. There were certainly people that I were friends with in my life where my parents might say, might want to watch your wallet around them.
Yep.
And rightfully so in
Yes.
hindsight. I
Yes.
mean, not that directly, but
Right.
it's, if somebody was clearly like a problem child in terms of like getting in trouble a lot, my parents would say, you might want to think carefully about what you're doing with this person. If I said I was going out with that person, my parents never said you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't be friends with that person. You can't date that person. And and I think that that's a big part. That in and of itself, like I got to be friends with people that were, maybe from the wrong side of the track, so to speak.
Hmm.
Because I didn't have parents who said you can't go out with that kid. That kid is, from the wrong side of the tracks, or that kid is his dad's a Southern Baptist minister, and that's it's not the kind of people we hang with.
We don't
Um,
do that kind of thing. No, that guy's a loser anyway. One of the things that you brought up, and I want to chase this rabbit just for a second. And honest to God, what Jason just said, and the close to 40 years that I've known him, and we've mentioned this before too, Travis. That's the first time that I ever knew anything about Jason's parents' political thought. That's something else that is very different now than what it was back in 1980s. We did not. I mean, everybody knew where my dad was at because if you knew Richard Van Beber and you didn't turn and run the other direction when you saw him coming down the street, you knew what he believed, and he would tell you what he thought was right and wrong. But outside the anomaly that was my father, was we didn't care, and we didn't care. At least in our group, we were the theater band geeks. That's who we were, the Scholar Bowl geeks, and we didn't care that your father was this person in our group, and we didn't care. Our Jason mentioned our friend Tony. Jason and I both grew up in a semi-Baptist background, somewhat. And Tony was,
I was Baptist, trending Methodist.
yeah, and Tony was Catholic. We didn't look at that. This is my friend
No.
Tony. We had a friend Greg who was not a church guy at all, and we didn't look at that oh, he did and he was this, or Tony was Catholic. We didn't know, and to this day, I don't know who Tony's mom Catherine, who she would have voted for, or who Greg's mom or dad voted, or Jason's. And it wasn't something
Yeah.
that Shale, and what Jason just said, that was something cool about, and my parents were just almost carbon copy of what Jason just said. My parents encouraged me to make friends and to be out there, and I mean, we were the guys who were, when we did stuff, we were the nerds who said, "Hey, let's get together and play a game of Axis." I was more Tony and Jason would play Axis and Allies, and I would sit along and pretend to know Axis and Allies is an older game. You guys, new guys, wouldn't know anything about. I barely knew anything about it, but I tried to pretend like I knew what was going on because it required strategy, and I wasn't that smart enough. Still, probably
It's
not that.
risk on steroids for
It's
anybody who
risk on
plays Risk.
steroids, but it was. But and they encouraged us to and one of the things that I've always held true to my friends from my childhood is that we know each other at our base, who we were at our base, and we knew, okay, these guys are probably going to be the outside of our group. We knew that, I'm married to one of the people who were in the older part of our group, and we we cared for people for who they were and not for what their party belief was or what their social economic class was or who their anything was. And when I look at today's world, I'm like, this is what I mean. Everything is based upon, in my view anyway, what I see a lot of in the education community with the kids today is it's more material driven. It's more societal driven as far as where am I at on the ladder. And unless I was really blind to it, Jason, you can correct me, and I know you would if you. But I mean, I didn't see so much of that in our time growing up because we didn't. We had what was on TV, but we didn't have the influx of social media constantly bombarding us with their views. Would you? Would you?
I would say that's fairly accurate. And to touch on what you were saying about connecting with people who it, so a friend of ours, a mutual friend growing up, um I'll refrain from names, it doesn't matter,
No.
but we were pretty close friends, and he's became a I won't even say that he was necessarily a Trump supporter, whatever with that, but he was a meme generator. His Facebook was a meme generating machine, um, and really really bad memes, kind of the sort of most hateful memes. And he's not a hateful person. He really isn't. Um, he was one of the sweetest guys that I went to school with, and through the years, he would reach out to me and say, "This is the point that I'm getting to." He would reach out to me, usually through Messenger, and he would say, I was driving the other day and I was listening to the radio and they were talking about global warming. They were talking about how global warming was a hoax. And, I think global warming is a hoax. But then I start thinking, like, well, could this have caused global warming? Or what about this? Would this have caused global warming? And, like, you're one of the smartest guys I know. And I want to know, like, does this make sense to you? Do you think this is true? Is global warming a hoax? I mean, he would reach out to me with, like, to me they were really poignant questions from somebody who both a seemed a little brainwashed politically, but also maybe didn't have the education that allowed him to frame some of those things in a more, I don't want to say open, but in a more fact-based way.
Right.
He would struggle with these dilemmas of things that didn't make sense to him politically, that he would reach out to me for, even though we hadn't seen each other face to face in decades. We hadn't talked on the phone in decades. And yet he was always reaching out to me. And that meant a lot to me that, that many years later, he still thought that much of what was essentially a high school friendship.
And it was interesting that you mentioned there too, that our generation has been a part of the changes in the things that we have seen within our lifetime. And you talk about on Facebook being a meme generator, and that fact alone, because a lot of our opinion of what our opinion was generated upon where we were raised and how we perceived the world by the nightly news. I mean, we had Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite was on his way out, but we had Tom Brokaw and we had these guys and Peter Jennings, and these guys told us the news. They didn't tell us our opinion or how we were supposed to think about it.
Right.
And they would mention, I mean, we'd heard about global warming by senior high school, freshman year of college. It was becoming a thing, But when you look at some of this stuff now, we were the first, first MySpace, and then Facebook, and then now,
Yep.
and granted, it's great for us to be able to keep in touch with, and this has been one of those things where Jason and I had, you know, and always grateful, because there would be sometimes, and we've done this a couple times more than a couple times, a few times over the years. Whenever I remember when Jason and I were having a discussion, I think it was last year, year before last, on minimum wage stuff, and Jason would,
I still think you're wrong.
yeah, and so, but see, but we call each other out. He'd call me out on it, and there would be some times where I would, and I remember, I forget, it wasn't about minimum wage, but it was something totally, I forgot what it was now. But I had to call Jason. I called him out of the blue after I had kind of done some more research, and I was speaking out, pardon my French, but I was speaking out of my ass. And
I remember, if you want me to say,
yeah, what was it?
it was the early days of COVID.
Yeah, yeah, you're
it was
right.
the flu.
And after I did more, and when Jason called me out on it, I said, okay, here's one of my best friends in high school who's calling me out on something. Maybe I should totally sit back and rethink this. And as I went and looked at it, and I started researching, I called him up and I said, hey, man, thanks for, I value our friendship, and I want to, and I just wanted to, and I believe I apologized in that
You
conversation.
did,
And
which I
I,
appreciated.
and I was just like, look, that, but there are some there, and within our generation, we started what some of our generation is passing down. And of course, I haven't seen Henry since Jason's son since Tony's Mass, but I know without a shadow of a doubt that Jason has shaped his son into thinking, okay, think about what you're going to do, know what you're going to say. And this is the same thing that I'm imparting onto my children is, don't take everything at face value, examine what is given to you, and look more at it. And I mean, it's still, and I'm at age 48, I still feel myself still trying to, there's still parts of maturity that I still haven't reached it, even at 48.
Yeah.
Am I talking out of my butt again, Jason, or is that, I mean,
No, I think you're right, and we can debate the science, but there's something to the scientific method,
yeah.
in and of itself. Of
And this is, and again, I say this a lot on our podcast. We got a couple minutes left here, but I've always said this about our podcast. This is one of the missions of our podcast, is to have people on. And this is also part of, with this series that we're doing, is to, kind of reconnect and see where we've come from, our roots. And I always forget, Travis, I always forget the to go over the poll results. But on our poll results, if I can, let me find it here.
I didn't vote because I didn't want to.
No, it's not like we've got a ton of voters. But our poll question this week was, if you could tell yourself from your high school self, what would be some of the things that you would change, or what would be the topic of conversation that you would have with your, I'm trying to get to pull up, but I had said things like oh shoot, I gotta find it now. This makes me mad. I can't find it. But it was what would be the topic of your conversation? And one of the things, here it is. I found it now. It was, so the choices were career choices, relationship advice, politics, spiritual religion, investing, college, and relationship with family. Strangely enough, 75% of our votes tonight were on career choices, 12% was on college, 6% was relationship with family, and 6% was on politics. And then the other, screw relationship advice, investing, spiritual, kids, all that other stuff. But, when I look at where, you know, I was glad with where I ended up with, where I've told people before I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I had a high school biology teacher who absolutely hated me, and I wasn't too fond of her. But you know, but this is something that I think that we wanted to kind of to touch on tonight, and I want to thank Jason for being on tonight and walking back down memory lane, even though we had an internet hiccup. So sorry for those who were online tonight. But we will, those of you who are going to be listening on Spotify tomorrow when it's posted, you won't know the difference, so it's okay. So, but we want to thank you, Jason, brother. It's good to see you and discuss some old time things tonight.
Before we leave, I want to present you with something that might add a little bit to the story to the time.
What are you doing?
What is it? I can't see.
Oh my God! Where did you find that at? Do you want to?
It's an old coffee can.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Old coffee can.
So
we'll leave that at that. So.
What was that?
For another discussion.
No, I mean, if Jason wants to share, he can. So that's okay.
I'll be quick. So we used to go camping in the timber, right?
God.
and there might have been some flammable stuff
Gasoline.
in this coffee can that was used to start a fire.
Gasoline.
And
how do you still have
a buddy
that?
of ours? It was passed down to me from Tony.
I can kicked over the
Tony
can and it went into the.
Yeah, Greg. Yeah, as I recall, Greg used it to throw some gas on the fire that was already burning, and then dragged it back and set it down on the ground under the nylon lawn chair that you were sitting in. That was my grandmother's lawn chair. She's dead now, so we can tell this story.
Oh my God!
And what was left of the can went up like a torch, and the chair that Andy was sitting in went up like a torch. And Andy didn't get burned, and Greg didn't get burned, but the chair went up like a torch.
That's the fastest I ever saw myself ever move.
And then, like the good Christian kids that we were, we did not confess that mistake to my grandmother.
I thought I'd never see that. You bring that coffee can out, I knew exactly what that was from, where it was from.
We took that lawn chair frame over into the neighboring property and dumped it in the creek.
Yep, and it probably still washed up in a creek bed somewhere. So.
And we lived to tell about
my God! I saw that.
So kids,
I cannot believe you.
My lesson for the day.
Jeez.
My lesson for the day is, they say, back in my day, we didn't have all these safety. We just let our kids do whatever we want.
Take gasoline.
Andrew J. Van Bember right here. He's an example that almost doesn't always pay off.
Nope. That was. I cannot. God, I can't believe you had that. Cheese. I thought that. Wow.
Tony passed that to me.
Oh man.
I can't even tell you. I think when they moved to Cleveland. I think he gave it to me when they moved to Cleveland.
Yeah,
and
that would.
Tony was in my garage. It's been in my garage waiting for this day.
Oh man, God, I could have went. I think I could have went another 30 years without ever seeing that coffee can ever again. I cannot believe.
Let's not make it another 30 years.
No, we'll go camping.
He can't let you forget about that.
No,
I'm gonna turn it into a trophy. It wasn't even his fault. We were all idiots.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
but
that was good. So, Jason, thanks for being.
Your mom doesn't have to hear the bad news.
No, she.
My grandmother's not around
yep,
to know that the lawn chair is gone. My mom.
I'm sure that your mom and my mom are watching along up in heaven right now, and they're having a good laugh about it.
Sorry,
Mom. Sorry, Mom. But anyway, thanks for being with us tonight.
Yep.
Travis, anything you want to say before we close out tonight?
Gentlemen, at some point, I would love to do a part two of this. I have so many questions for you guys that we didn't have time for. Your all's generation, I have a lot of questions, and I would love to do a part two at some point.
We may,
That's all I got. I would love to do this again.
yep. So, thank you
I
all.
would go all night, but
Yeah.
Andy's trying to get out of here,
Yep.
so I'll let
Yep.
you guys
I
wind
know,
down.
I know.
Anyway, well, thank you all for joining. Hopefully, Sean will be back with us next week when we have we haven't decided who's going to go first, Travis or Sean. The next two shows will probably be rated R, if not NC-17, for some of the stuff that you guys did.
Mine won't be that bad.
And Sean's
Mine won't
will be.
that bad.
So, anyway,
Maybe.
yep. Anyway, thank you all. Have a great evening, and we'll see you all next week.
All right, see ya.
Bye, guys.